I needed not just to hear it in here, but I needed to hear the rhema. I needed to hear his spoken word. I said, if you promise me that you'll never leave me, I'll never say no. And I just felt peace, and I felt like he was saying, I promise. He wasn't offended by it at all. I just felt like he was saying, I promise, I'm never going to leave you. One of the things that I'm really, really trying to learn and really serious is not just, about how quickly I can close my mouth, but the conversation that goes on in my heart about all people, because it's impossible to curse our brothers and sisters and love God. It's just impossible. And so the things that we say in our heart set us up for success or for failure, to have an impact or to go home early. And it wasn't easy. I hope I don't make it sound easy. It was a process, and I had to learn a lot, and we had to repent a lot for the things that he would show us. And he would show us, I didn't just come for one, I came for all. You can't just love the prostitutes, Deena. You got to love the pimps. I remember bringing my beautiful teenage daughter that God had just cleaned up as she was abandoned at our gate, just cleaned up and filled with the Spirit. And I told you the story. She was the one, that one. And brought her on this. She wanted to go on the streets to minister to the prostitutes with me. And the pimps and the Johns were circling her. First my mama heart came out, and which it should, but also the fear of the Lord. And he said, you have to love them all. So I just protected her with my body and made sure that my heart was right, so that I had an impact. And I did have an impact with them. And side note, so I'm just trying to give you a picture, because when we read scriptures about setting the captives free, releasing the yoke, breaking every yoke, people about visiting those in prison, about all of these things, I think sometimes we don't understand that the most marginalized group, in my opinion, are orphans. They fit every one of those categories. There's not one of those babies that I knew that could crawl out of their crib and leave the orphanage. They were completely dependent on the people that were there to give them whatever they were going to get for that day. They were the most oppressed, the most bound, out of all the people that I've ever ministered to, I've never seen such bondage as what the enemy has tried to do to the children of God. And it's just such an injustice. It's such an injustice. And so I remember this, this little girl, and she's crying, she's screaming her head off, and the nurse is being rough, and now this is after weeks, maybe months, I don't remember how long, but of serving and praying and blessing and all of that. And I said, and I had formed a relationship with one of the IEs, and a little relationship, not super strong yet, but a little bit. And I kept coming back, and so that spoke to them. And I said, can I hold her? And she said, yeah, go ahead. And I remember I picked her up, and before I knew what was happening out of my mouth, and now I'm a woman that really stewards her words, because I just really believe that our words are super powerful. And so I try to think about the things that I say and say the things that I'm serious about. And so after I wasn't even thinking, but I picked her up and I said to her, I'm going to take you home. And as soon as I said it, I thought, how am I going to do that? Because they've already told me that I'm not allowed to have any children. I mean, think about this. It makes perfect sense. I was a foreigner who had only been in China less than 3 months at this point on a tourist visa. If we had foreigners come into America, we would not let them go into our system and grab a child out and take them into their home. So, it might sound like the government was being cruel, but I can understand these laws, It seemed crazy to me when I started asking for children. It seemed so outrageous and so crazy. And so, but I said to her spontaneously, I'm going to take you home with me. And so I didn't know how I was going to do that. So the rest of my time I spent holding her. I was praying in the Spirit. And thank you, Joseph Garlington, for talking, not this time, but times before, about the power of praying in the Spirit and just reminding. I'm telling you, I'm giving you strategies in the middle of the talk. There's simple strategies: prayer, worship, praying in the Spirit, fasting, foundational things that never grow old, that you never outgrow, that are so valuable. And I'm so thankful for the gift of praying in tongues, because there's so many times I don't know what I'm doing, and I know that I can pray the heart of God without even having to understand. And so I'm praying in the Spirit, and finally they take her away from me, and I can't show emotion. I can't, it's not the time. So, take a deep breath and go to the leaders who have already mocked me and made fun of me and all of that, and said, this little girl literally dying, like within days she would be dead. She was gray. Her brain was bulging out of her forehead. They put them in these little troughs, their heads in these steel cribs, in these little wooden cross that they make. And so that the babies can't turn their heads from the left to the right, because they don't hold them when they feed them. And so what they do is they cut off the top of the nipple, and because a lot of the babies are too weak, too sick, too premature to suck, swallow, breathe. And so they cut off the top of the nipple. They put their heads in this trough so that they can't move their head, and the milk flows into their mouth. Well, most of them can't swallow. And so you hear drowning. I can't even tell you how many children that were there one day and gone the next. I know, because they aspirated. That it was, it's part of my training too as a speech pathologist, and I would just go in and hear silence and hear gurgling. And the parts that they did get in, they just put a towel around their neck, and the towel was to catch the vomit, because the babies weren't lifted up to burp or to anything like that. And so it's demonic. It's demonic, and it's happening right now. Millions, not a few. Every year in China, 1 million babies are abandoned. Only 7,000 are adopted. The rest spend their lives in institutions. And they're not kind institutions. And that's just China. That's just China. So I go to the government and we ask for her, and they said, no, absolutely not. Stupid woman. Who do you think you are? And no. And we said, okay, thank you for giving me the appointment. Went home, talked to God, and got on our face and prayed and cried out to God. And in that process, about a week into praying for her, it was time for us to go to Hong Kong to renew our visas. We had been in China for 3 months, and it was time for us to go to Hong Kong to renew our visas. We thought Hong Kong was just like mainland China. We didn't know that it was the 4th most expensive city in the entire world. And mainland China is very inexpensive. And so during that time, there was credit card theft that was going on, and that we didn't know about. And so some friends of ours that we had made said, you're going to Hong Kong to get your visa. They said, don't bring cash with you. There's a lot of pickpockets. And so they recommended bring enough cash to get to the hotel. And when you get there, go to the ATM, take money out, and use that for spending. And so we said, okay. And so we did that, and we brought about 400 renminbi with us. And, a taxi in our city is about, at that time, 50 renminbi, to go from where we were in the village into the city. So we're, thinking about the same. And we get our kids in the taxi, 3 kids, 8, 5, 1.5, and get our kids in the taxi. Don't speak a lick of Chinese yet. Don't know anybody in Hong Kong. Get to Hong Kong, get in a taxi, get to the hotel, and the taxi driver said, "That'll be 400 RMB, please." And we said, "Okay, well, wow, that was expensive." And so we had the money to pay for the taxi, went into the hotel, and we had been able to book the hotel with a credit card, but you can't pay with a credit card, or at that time you couldn't, only with a Bank of China, which we didn't have. We only had a Visa. And so we could hold the room on the Visa, but we couldn't pay the room with the Visa. We could only pay with a Bank of China card. And so they let us check into the room, me with the 3 kids, and Mike went to find an ATM. We didn't realize, for any of you Chinese people out there, that it was May 1st. And May 1st in 2005 was a national holiday where all of the banks, all of the government offices were closed for a week. And not only that, but all the ATMs were shut down because of this credit card theft that had been going on. So there was no way to go to the ATM, and there was no bank that was open to get money. And we knew nobody, and we had no money, and we were in Hong Kong. And my kids, I remember my kids were crying. They were little, your kids they were crying and they were hungry. We didn't even have a bottle of water to give them. And Mike came back, and he told the hotel staff first. They said, "We'll give you 24 hours to be out of the hotel. And if you can't pay, we'll give you 24 hours and you need to be out of the hotel." And so Mike came up to the room and told me right behind him was this little man that came to lock the minibar to make sure that we didn't steal any water or food out of the minibar. Now, you have to understand, we could have, in our former life, we could have paid for anything. We could have bought what we needed for ourselves, and we could have blessed you. And now I'm sitting here in this hotel room. We'd given everything we had away, and sitting there, and I can't even feed my children. I can't give my babies a drink of water. And I'm new. I'm not a seasoned missionary or a seasoned pastor or anything like that. Just Mike and I are brand new. And so he went for a walk like he does when he needs to pray and think. And I went into the bathroom because I didn't want to make my kids afraid and them see me cry and pray. And so I did that. And Mike came across this Christian bookstore. It's a long story, but I'll just give you the gist of it. Right before we went to China, we had been in Africa. We really thought we would be in Africa long term, but the Lord called us to China. And so we had spent some time with Heidi and Roland. So Mike stumbles into this bookstore and starts talking to the owners of the bookstore, and they are friends of Heidi and Roland. In Hong Kong, in a little Christian bookstore in Hong Kong, and they're talking, and he's asking questions and finds out what's going on. Well, of course, they blessed us, and they paid for everything, and it was beautiful. It was wonderful, and such an answer, to our need. But the woman, before we left, she handed us this book, and it was from the House of Loving Faithfulness, and it was about children that were in Hong Kong like 60 years ago. And these 2 missionaries from England 60 years ago that came when children with disabilities were on the street and kept in cages. And these women would go and they would unlock cages and they would take in like 5 or 8 kids was all the 2 of them could handle. And so they would take them out and they would treat them like their own, and they would love on them. And so she said, "I believe that this is why you're in China, and this is why this has happened to you. And so she just hands this book to me, and I start reading it. And I know that I've heard this invitation before. I know as I'm looking, it was page after page of pictures of children, pictures of people with all kinds of disabilities, no arms, no legs, all kinds of disabilities, special needs, and their story. And we didn't go to China to open an orphanage. We didn't go to China to take care of kids with special needs. We didn't know why we were going to China. There wasn't a plan. It was just we had gotten touched. We felt like we prayed into it. We fasted. We waited for confirmation. And when we got it, we went to China. And when we got to China, we prayed. And so she's handing me this book, and I'm reading it, and I'm feeling the invitation, and I'm thinking in my mind at the same time, and I'm thinking, this is what God's calling us into. And I'm thinking, I got scared. And I thought, okay, I know me as a mom, as a woman. I know that the first child with a severe disability that I take in, I know that means that I could never send that child back. And if I couldn't adopt that child, that means that my whole life would be given to this. And I knew that, as much as I loved people, I knew that it would be different than what I thought, to take care of somebody as they got bigger, and wiping bottoms and wiping drool and all the unlovely things that we don't always think about. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking, God, I don't know that I have this kind of love, but I know that you do. I know that you do. And I know that it's silly for me to pray this, but I needed not just to hear it in here, but I needed to hear the rhema. I needed to hear his spoken word. I said, if you promise me that you'll never leave me, I'll never say no. And I just felt peace, and I felt like he was saying, I promise. He wasn't offended by it at all. I just felt like he was saying, I promise, I'm never going to leave you. And we fly back into China, into mainland China. This was Saturday night I prayed this prayer. Fly back into China Sunday morning, get a phone call, and these three these three Christian women from a village town outside of the city found a little itty-bitty baby. And he was just a hot mess. They found him in the mountain roads. It's a known fact that where we are anyways, if you leave a baby in the mountains, that they're going to be eaten by animals. And it's a way that people are able to abandon their children without getting caught, because it's against the law to abandon your children. And so this child was left on the mountain road with the intention of not making it. And these women said that when they came up on the baby, they heard the voice of the Lord, and the Lord said, this child is important, don't let him die. So they picked the baby up, and they took the baby home, severe cleft lip, cleft palate, severe brain disorder, severe heart, could not tell if the child was a boy or a girl, ambiguous sex, blistered head to toe, born too early, still had his umbilical cord, and could not eat, could hardly breathe. And so they're trying to keep this baby alive for 3 days. They took him to every orphanage that they could find. Every orphanage said, no way, he's too severe. There's no way that we can take him, just let him die. And so, but they had heard God's voice. And so we flew back into China, and they had been fasting for 3 days. We didn't know what was going on with them. They didn't know what was going on with us. They talked to somebody that morning, and they said, well, we can't help you, but we know this couple, and maybe, we heard that they'd been visiting the orphanages. Maybe they would help. And so they call us, and they said, we have this baby. Will you take him? And we said, of course. And we had nothing. I remember Mike having to scramble to the store to buy a crib, and just all of these things. And not too long after that, we get this knock on the door, and just through the door. He was so small. There was no clothes. There was nothing that fit him, no diaper, anything. He was just, so super tiny. So they hand me this baby, and I open this towel. And seriously, guys, it was like I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't, I was preparing for the child. I wasn't expecting the encounter. And as I unwrapped him, it was like unwrapping Jesus, is all I can say. It was one of the holiest moments that I've ever had. And I thought to myself, I remember just standing there holding him. All the fear, all the insecurities that I had before the cross, all the stuff that was coming up melted away. And I thought to myself, I was made for this. I'll do this the rest of my life. And then I thought, oh my goodness, God, you knew me better than I knew myself. Never, I was 35, never had a clue that I was made for this. And God knew me better than I knew myself, and he gave us this little package. Well, there was still, so we got this baby and had no identity, no birth certificate, no proof of his existence. And so we had to bring him to the orphanage. Now, the orphanage had already told us that we couldn't have the other baby. Remember, the little dying girl, that we couldn't have her and take care of her. And so I have to call them and say, I have this child, and we don't know, are they going to take him away from us or not? And then there's this other little girl that we've already said that we wanted. And they said, first of all, they said, absolutely, it's against Chinese law. You cannot foster a Chinese child. And they said, more than that, not even Chinese people foster more than one child in a family. So there's no way you're getting multiple children. And we said, okay, hang the phone up, go get on our face and pray. Not long, less than a week later, get this phone call, you can have the baby. And get this other phone call, you can have the baby. And the Lord gave us these two amazing little preemie babies. And I feel like I'm supposed to tell you this. We were supposed to name her Faith. We pray about every child's name. And we felt like the Lord said, we feel like we're learning how to hear God's voice. We feel like the Lord says, name her Faith. And that kind of gave me faith, because I thought if the Lord calls her Faith, he's going to heal her. She was very, very, very sick. When they ended up calling us to tell us that we could take her, they said, she's so sick, she has a form of meningitis that's contagious, and it could kill your whole family. And so, do you still want her? It's like, and the first thing I thought of was my mom and dad. Believe it or not, I thought, how hard it was to take their grandchildren away from them, and how hard it was. Our family loved each other fiercely, and my kids loved their grandparents, and their grandparents loved them, and how hard that was. And I thought, God, what if you ask me to do this, and it means the life of my children? And then I thought, but if I prayed, and you opened the door, that even if worst case scenario, I know that everything is going to be okay. And so we took the baby. You know what I've learned as far as fear is concerned? This might not be a great strategy, but it might help somebody, I don't know. But, I hear a lot of people say, like, talk really in denial about things that could happen. And I've seen so many amazing, amazing people that go through stuff, including ourselves, and we don't know what's going to happen. And so when the enemy tries to bring me something that makes me afraid, that has real validity to make me afraid, like, my kid's dying or things like that have real, that could really happen, I've found that I look at it. I look at the fear right in the face and I say, worst case scenario, all will be well with my soul. Because I don't know what tomorrow's going to hold, and I don't know what the Lord will do in my life. I trust him. I trust him, and I know that he could do whatever he wants, and it's going to be for my good, for my family's good, for the good of the world. Even if it doesn't look good in my own understanding, I know that it will be good. So that's the strategy that I use. Instead of just trying to, I just look at it and I say, okay, you're trying to make me afraid with this. I'm telling you, I'm standing right here saying, no matter what, my soul is going to rejoice in the Lord. My soul is committed to my Father. My soul knows that my God is good. So